the Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
Has been Alabama and Tennessee. Alabama ultimately gets to the Final Four. Tennessee gets to the Elite Eight this past cycle. Bart Torvik, though, still likes Tennessee's lineup and potential contributors more than Alabama. So, Ryan Schumpert, what say you in this regard? Do you lean more towards Bama being the better roster and what you've seen from Sears and company, or do you think with Lanier and with Dubar, with Igor, and with everybody coming back for Tennessee that Bart Torvik might be onto something? The numbers are probably more right than what national media folks are seeing with Alabama versus Tennessee, because I think there is a big split here in what the numbers might bear out versus what national folks think the SEC might ultimately play out as.
Yeah, I think there's very little chance I'm not discombobulated going through all this, because in my head, I'm with the national media members. To me, not that it's a massive gap, but I do think Alabama's roster is definitely better. I mean, I think Kansas is the one roster I'd say in the entire country that's better than Alabama. But I obviously have, I'm one of the people that thinks that the analytics, to Bart Torvik, to KenPom, like those are usually the guys to trust, and those guys get it right a whole lot more than your average way too early top 25 does from Jeff Goodman or whoever. So I think that's interesting. And I guess it's two things when I look at the analytics. One that makes sense to me and one that confuses me. I think Alabama, they were good analytically all last year, but the defense was such a concern that, I think they did some things to address that concern, especially with Clifford from Rutgers. He's one of the best. I think you talk about these two teams, and I think there were 6 players that blocked 80 shots in college basketball last year. Tennessee got one in the portal and Felix Okpara, and then Alabama got one with Clifford. I don't know how you pronounce his last name, the guy from Rutgers. The Big Red Dog is what I'm going to be calling him. So does the defense really get a lot better? I mean, I think that's a big piece, but to me, a lot of the questions you have about Alabama's defense last year, Grant Nelson, Mark Sears, the guys that they brought in the portal that you like besides Clifford, a lot of defensive questions. So that part to me, I guess I understand why Alabama's a little bit lower on the analytics, because you're always going to have those teams that make a run into the Final Four. They're always going to be higher on the way too early than the analytics are going to have them. What surprised me about Tennessee when it comes to the analytics is I think they're second or third defense and like 63rd or something offensively, which I feel like Tennessee's going to be definitely better than 63rd offensively. I don't think they're maybe not going to be as good as they were last year, but it surprises me that Tennessee, it surprises me that Tennessee is so high on Bart Torvik, considering how low their offense is still rated. Because if Tennessee's offense is the 63rd best in February, according to KenPom and Bart Torvik and all those sites, I feel pretty confident Alabama is going to be a definitively better team.
Which is just, I don't see that. That's a huge drop. Like Tennessee's offense was an elite this past. Where did they finish with KenPom? What were they on offense ultimately?
25 to 30.
I was going to say 20th. I didn't know if it was
late 20s, early 30s, somewhere in that range.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at who won. I mean, UConn's obviously top 10 in both, and you want to if you want to ultimately win a title, you need to be top 10 in both. I mean, Tennessee's going to have a top 10 defense. That much is certain next year. But this maybe goes into the next question, Ryan. Like, it's interesting that they're down on the offense, because I think shooting's gonna be better across the board. I think obviously there's a drop off from Dalton Connect and what he is when he gets hot, but I think the shooting as a whole is gonna be better. Like, I think Dubar, Igor, Sakai. I mean, just across the board, I think it's gonna be. I mean, obviously Chaz Lanier and what he's gonna bring. Jordan Gainey, I think, will be better, and he'll shoot. I don't see how, he really struggled making the adjustment from USC State to Tennessee this year, shooting wise, but we know he can shoot. We've seen at that level that he can shoot the ball, and I think he'll shoot the ball better next year as well. And I don't know, you just look around, I just feel like Tennessee just has so many shooters. Cam Carr, obviously a guy who will be fearless shooting threes. I think he's going to shoot the ball. I just feel like there's just so many more shooters on next year's team than what we saw this year. You had the ultimate flamethrower offensive weapon in Dalton, but I think there's way more variety on this year's team. And you still have someone who lit it up in a similar way to Dalton in Northern Colorado that he did at University of North Florida in Chaz Lanier. So I don't know. I would be something went horribly wrong to me if Tennessee is anywhere outside of, at worst, the 30s offensively. Something went their bad injuries are the only thing that I think to me would lead to Tennessee not having a top 30 offense at the very worst.
Top 30 or top 40?
Top 30.
See,
The shooting's just too much. Like, the shooting's good. Like, they should be able to shoot lights out from three. Like, this should be a very, very good shooting team.
I just looked it up. They were 28th last year offensively. You're saying you'd be very surprised if they take any step back, which to me,
I mean, that's my question. I think this roster is better than last year's. Like, Santi didn't shoot the ball well. Like, Josiah was in and out. You had Tobey and Jonas in a lot of those minutes. You had, I mean, Jordan Gainey obviously did not shoot the ball well last year. I don't know. I just feel like
I think the shooting's better. I think the shooting's better. Dalton Connect was the best perimeter player in the entire country. Yeah. So there's a big drop off there. And to me, I think the crux of this whole question of the offense, because the shooting is going to be better. You're going to have elite point guard play again. Felix Okpara, I think, is going to be able to score at the rim. He's not going to be a guy you throw the ball into, but I think finish at the rim well. It's what Chaz Lanier can be as a shot creator for himself. That's the question. Because to me, that is the question on the roster. Is there a guard that can create their own shot at a high level? Because Sakai, as much as I really like him, that's not at 5'9" or whatever he is. He's not going to be able to do that at a super high level. And as much as I like the other transfer portal gets they got in Darlington Dubar and Igor Milicic, I'm skeptical, especially Dubar, about what they're going to be able to do when it comes to creating their own shot. So who is going to be the guy that can go out, get to the basket, score in the mid-range?
I mean, it should be Chaz. Like, that's what that's why you kept the spot. Like, that's what you, I mean, it should be Chaz.
It should be, yeah. And I think he'll be able to do that. But Chaz Lanier can be good and can score 14, 15 points a game and make a good transition. And he's not going to be 75% of offensive production that Dalton Connect is. That's just such a big drop-off. And again, that's where I don't see 63. I would be very surprised if it's 63. I don't think the drop-off is going to be close to that big. But when you're talking about something went terribly wrong, if they're not in the top 30, I mean, that's literally, if the offense isn't just as good, something went terribly wrong. I wouldn't go that far.
I just don't think that Jack, when you look at the difference, the disparity between the two. I mean, I guess it's just I'm very optimistic about the overall influx of talent to combat the loss of Dalton Connect. Like, if it was just a 1-for-1 Dalton for Chaz from last year's team, I think I could see that kind of drop off offensively. But I think Igor's going to be really good. I think Dubar is going to be really, really good. Even if they're not creating their own shot as much as you want, I'm really in on the shooting that Tennessee will be able to do as a whole. And if Chaz Lanier is even 80% offensively of what Dalton Connect was last year, I just feel like the offense should be relatively close to where they were a year ago. I think something went really wrong if they're not somewhere around where they were last year. When you consider what Chaz should be bringing coming in from North Florida and how high they were coming in to this offseason. I mean, obviously he was a huge priority for Tennessee, that I think it should be expected that he's a big part of this. Like, it's fair for Tennessee fans not to be like, oh, we're going to have Dalton Connect 2.0, but like, to have high expectations for Chaz should be the expectation. Is you should have high expectations for Chaz Lanier to be a big time player and one of the best players in the SEC next year. And if that's the case, that's why I'd be surprised with the guys around him and everything else. It's like Tennessee's offense should be really good.
No, I think you make a lot of sense. And, you know, it's crazy how much they were able to replenish. And, you know, Tennessee's kind of a portal team almost at this point, considering how many starters they're going to have in portal out of the portal next season. But, you know, I think you look at the other players they lost, and maybe you point to Santi and Joe. Well, you know, those guys weren't really consistent offensive contributors last year, especially Santiago Vescovi. So, you know, it's really DK, and he obviously had the ability to just take games over better than anyone in the SEC. That's why he won SEC Player of the Year. But, you know, it's just, I think why it's easy to say that Tennessee's offense isn't going to be as good is because it's an unknown commodity. There's so much unknown with.
Well, it's a lot of turnover, right? You're betting on a lot of people to work together, right?
Right. What their stars are going to be next year. There's so much unknown because you haven't seen them in a Tennessee uniform yet. But I'll ask you guys, do you think their big men will be better offensively next year?
I'm glad you asked that, because no, I don't think so.
Well, what is the rotation? Are we saying the rotation is JP, Okpara, Dubar, and Igor at the 4?
I think
As the
it's
backup 4?
I think Igor and Dubar will be the two guys that played a majority of the minutes at the 4.
Okay, then yes, I think they'll be better if that's the case. Offensively, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're considering the 4 spot too, I'm not
Yes.
considering the 4 spot as big men because Tennessee has not played big men at the 4 spot. They didn't play it last year, and
True.
Igor Milicic and Darlinson Dubar are wing players, in my opinion. Obviously,
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, if we're going 4-5, then I think yes. If we're going strictly 5, no.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and I don't think either way it's going to be a massive difference.
Yeah,
like I don't think just the 5. That Tennessee was going to get way less production this year offensively than they did last year. And I think if you include both, I don't think this coming year they'll get way more than they did last year. But I would.
I mean, Estrella might start too. Estrella
Chris.
he might make a big jump. Like Estrella, I don't know. Like it may.
Estrella can make a big jump. I'd be surprised if he starts.
Well, I think it's going to be like if Jemai starts, then I think you might need to lean towards Estrella starting. Like I do wonder with the Okpara and Jemai, who I mean, obviously I'm the biggest Jemai guy on this podcast, but I do think, and when we talk about the offense and what you ultimately want to be in that top 30 range of where you were a year ago, these are things you have to consider. Is what's the best 5 to make sure our offense is as good as it can be, and we don't have any of those long time lulls, and how you start games. Like I don't know if you start with Okpara and Jemai. Like I wouldn't be surprised if that's how he started, but I also wouldn't. I don't know. I think it's something to not put in stone this summer.
Yeah, and my first thought is definitely to put it into stone. And I won't reject it. Maybe I shouldn't. I don't think that's just a crazy thought. Where I would kind of disagree or maybe push back is like I don't think Tennessee's going to be starting games unless he just makes an unbelievable jump into an all SEC level big man. The first 4 minutes of the game, the offensive game plan is not going to be throw the ball to JP Estrella, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Maybe he does make that jump, and he's a guy that can score 13 points a game and be an all SEC guy. But I don't see that. And given that, if you take that away, because JP Estrella is definitively a better back-to-the-basket scorer than Felix Okpara is, you take that away, I don't think there's a big gap in what they can do offensively. I mean, Okpara is a great athlete, and neither of them at this point can shoot the ball very well from more than 10 feet away from the basket. So I think certainly the offensive ceiling right now is clearly a lot higher for JP Estrella, but I don't think the floors are all that different in what the baseline of what each one can give you on the offensive end.
Final thing here, Jack Foster. ESPN's FBI loves the Vols football roster here going into next year. They're in the top 10 going into next year, post transfer portal and everything else. When you start thinking about Tennessee and the 2024 roster, and like we kind of know now, by and large, injuries. I mean, like hopefully this is the vast majority of like the starters
Nicely
that we
done,
think
nephew.
and the guys who are in the building.
The Chase Thomas podcast. Hell yeah.